Upper and lower arm. The main masses of the upper and lower arm are good examples of the principle of contraposition, one form being in opposition to, or moving in a different direction from, another. For example, the shoulder mass thrusts upward, while the direction of the biceps and triceps is frontward and backward. The forearm repeats the up and down direction of the shoulder and is opposed by the horizontal angle of the hand. The upper sketch shows the retracted and extended arm positions, while the lower left sketch emphasizes form planes. Observe how the contraposed masses shown in the lower right sketch produce an undulant, wave-like rhythm of crests and troughs along the entire length of the extended arm. ANWO contraposed masses. These drawings also show the undulant rhythms produced by contraposed masses, direction indicated by arrows. In this sequence of varied movements of the upper and lower arm, note the tendency of the forearm to lift at the upper wrist. The palm takes a decided slope downward, depending on the natural flexion of the hand. Underarm curves. When the arm is brought up and extended forward, it curves under from armpit to elbow and from elbow to wrist. This never varies, no matter what position the entire arm may take. Note the reversed backward direction of the arm in the drawing at right. Even with the elbow raised, the double underarm curve is still present. At the end of the lower arm curve, the palm interrupts this movement with a decisive change of direction. T-bank. While IFILAIENSO, kiss palm wedge. The wrist flattens at the end of the forearm, and the palm is out like a spatulate wedge, thick at the center and wide at the front where the finger knuckles emerge. This pow wedge is the governing form of all the secondary hand. Wrist and palm connection. In this rear view of the flexed forearm and hand, the palm wedge is seen from its top, dorsal, side. The tapered, flat wrist is joined to the spread palm, and these two forms remain consistent in any rotational direction the arm may take. Note that the flexed arm with forearm upraised and drawn inward permits the thumb to contact the shoulder, deltoid, muscle about midpoint on its upper bulge. Should the upper arm be raised vertically, the thumb would reach into the deep palm scoop. The base of the spatulate palm is thick vertically, but it spreads forward and flattens like a scoop or spade toward the front. The palmar side of the hand is hollow and dome-shaped. Dorsal side is somewhat rounded also, but much less so than the palm side. The deep, concave palmar underplane contains three major structures: the large thenar eminence of the thumb base, A, the less developed hypothenar eminence of the little finger plateau, B, and the palm ridge knuckle pads close to the deep hollow of the mid-palm, C. Palm wedge triangle. Three different views of the palm wedge also show the major understructures: the ball of the thumb, thenar eminence, the heel of the palm on the little finger side, hypothenar eminence, and the palm ridge knuckle pads. Note how the forms resemble a triangle with its apex pointing upward toward the shaft of the arm. Thumb triangle. The thumb emerges from the palm wedge as a narrow triangular block supported from underneath by the fleshy, curved thenar eminence. Two types of curves make up the palm wedge. The dorsal view of the hand at left shows the attitudinal arcs formed by the wrist, the palm knuckles, and the bones of the fingers. These form a sequence of ellipses, beginning at the point where the wrist joins the lower arm and continuing to the fingers. The cross-section of the thick rear palm at right shows the concave palm and the longitudinal curves running lengthwise from wrist to fingers. Rod and ball forms. As the fingers emerge from the palm knuckles, they develop three-part rod and ball forms: finger shank and knuckle capsule, as shown in the enlarged detail at center right. The rod and ball device is an easy and effective method for sketching direct hand action. Finger movements can be developed from a tentative exploration to an integrated drawing. The sketches at bottom are examples of beginning explorations before arriving at a final drawing. Rhythm of finger forms. When the rod and ball forms are integrated, they exhibit the same type of crest and trough rhythm as noted earlier in the drawings of the contraposed arm masses. A decisive upswing occurs at the fingertips in a variety of elevated curves, depending on finger movement and hand position. Symmetry of forms. The hand is seen from a top and underside view here, and the arrows trace out the symmetry of expanding knuckles and compressing finger shanks forms. This symmetry, however, would not be apparent from side views. Proportions and measurements. Anyone who has tried to draw the human figure has quickly learned that the hand is among the most complex of the body forms. To draw the hand accurately and with precision, you must know how to relate the individual parts to each other and how to unify the separate elements. A knowledge of proportions is necessary in art and should be used as a learning stage to new expressive adventures. This chapter will introduce essential measuring cues and their use in drawing the hand in correct proportion. Once the interrelated measurements are understood, you can create dynamic and alive hands without needing a model. You will also see the underlying symmetry and unity of the structures of the hand. The palm is the governing form of the hand, and it varies in shape from rectangular to square. From it, proportions and measurements of the entire hand can be determined. Note two important measuring cues shown here. First, the palm begins at the center of the wrist, A, and extends to the base of the middle finger, B, which forms part of the palm knuckle bulge. Second, the thumb emerges from the palm as a narrow triangular wedge extending at about a 25 to 30 degree angle. The base of the triangle, G, aligns with the vertical midpoint of the palm, H. The palm at its longest point, A to B, is the same length as the middle finger, B to F. Every section of the middle finger is half the length of the one above it. Thus the first phalanx and finger knuckle, B to C, is half the length of the entire finger. The middle phalanx and second knuckle, D to F, is half the length of the first phalanx, and if the terminal phalanx, D to F, is divided, we have the length of the finger. Nail, E to F. Other symmetries also exist. The schematic drawing at right shows the index and fourth fingers to be equal in length. Check this in both drawings and on your own hand. Also, the tips of the index and fourth fingers terminate at the nail bed of the middle finger. Not all people show these equal lengths exactly, but a large enough majority have them to make this a feasible premise. Now note how the end of the little finger aligns with the knuckle of the terminal phalanx of the fourth finger. The thumb also aligns with the palm and palm knuckles. The index finger knuckle, lines up with the knuckle at the midpoint of the thumb, J, and the tip of the thumb lines up with the first phalanx of the index finger. Foreshortened thumb positions. The drawings here show foreshortened views and emphasize thumb placement. The curved series of arrows indicates how the thumb, in advancing and receding positions in the depth plane, relates to the mid-hand, both dorsal and palmar sides, the palm knuckles, and the index finger knuckles. Use of these measuring cues can help you draw with more ease. Areas shown by the arrows here point out the relationship of the three long fingers of the hand. The index and ring finger lengths can be inferred from the nail bed of the middle finger. Since these fingers are usually about equal length, arcs from one to the other can be used to determine correct placement of knuckles and finger ends when viewed in the depth plane. Note that this works consistently in the variety of actions shown here. The tip of the little finger lines up with the last knuckle of the ring finger, thus finger placement can be easily integrated in all positions when this measuring cue is used. Correct positions of other fingers are based on measuring cues already described in previous drawings. For example, observe the alignment of thumb knuckle with mid-palm in the drawing at extreme right. Set angle of ulna and little finger knuckle, the large palm knuckle on the dorsal side of the hand, from which the little finger emerges, is directly in line with the ulnar protrusion, the base of the outer bone of the arm protruding at the wrist. This important relationship marks a transition point between top and side planes of the outside of both hand and arm. This alignment is quite apparent in the side view shown at lower left, but correct placement of these points is less obvious, though essential, when the hand is drawn from angles, as shown in the drawings at upper left and below. Inside planes of hand, in ARM, the top sketch shows the line marking the side edge of the index finger knuckles and on up the arm. This line defines the transition point between top and side planes of the inside of the hand and arm. It rises high at the wrist and palm, and then courses down to the fingertips. The juncture with the wrist, 0 point between arrow flows, occurs at the end of the inner forearm bone, the styloid process of the radius. The line of the thumb rises at an angle to meet the line of the index finger at the wrist girdling line. The juncture at the styloid process is invariable. The two lower sketches show how this point of intersection is consistent, even in different hand positions, in different views. Palm views in depth. Some of the most difficult views of the hand are those seen from the palm side, especially if the palm and fingertips are in deep space with the thumb in some extended action. The thumb and index finger placement then becomes most difficult, as does placement of the lines from inner and outer arm. In the upper drawing, the thumb has been put in ast, after the finger and rear arm lines have been set. Note the ease with which index finger and little finger palm lines relate to the contours of the lower forearm. The thumb insertion is found by relating it to the wrist girdle and index finger juncture, 0 point, as described earlier. The lower sketches show how the thumb goes from forward thrust at left to a deeper, upended thrust at right. Also note the arm line positions, especially those on the little finger side. Parallel curves and spirals dealing with measurements, proportions, and finger placement is the mechanics of good drawing. However, it is equally important to understand the hands as a larger, interrelated system of natural rhythms. When fingers are extended to their limit, as shown in the upper drawing, two of these natural rhythms occur. The extended fingers show subtle crests and troughs, and an upswing develops at the fingertips, which seem enormously energized. A second rhythm sweeps in arcs from knuckle to knuckle and from palm to fingertips. The drawing at bottom shows the almost rib-like curves of the fingers. When they swing parallel across the hand, starting at the palm and continuing to the fingertips, the general design of the hands can be quickly envisioned. Spiral and arc rhythms. Awareness of the elliptical spirals of the hand may produce spontaneous insight into form and can help you organize form when the hand is seen deeply foreshortened or with projected or closing fingers, as in the two drawings here. Note how vitalized the fingers look here. It doesn't matter at what point you start to lay in the natural rhythms, beginning with a free sketch first or with knuckle positioning. The sense of this rhythm will help you greatly in your sense of the design. Little finger and thumb relationships. The little finger and thumb have an affinity for each other. If the palm is open and spread wide, as shown in the center sketch, and lines are drawn from the tip of the thumb to the tip of the little finger at the outside edges, these lines will be at a 90-degree angle from each other and converge at the point where the palm joins the arm, 0 point. A line can also be drawn from this point to the end of the middle finger. If the thumb is moved across the open palm, this movement will form a hyperbolic arc to a point of contact with the base of the little finger. The dorsal palm knuckle is directly under the thumbnail on the dorsal side of the hand. The sketch at left illustrates that when the fingers are expressing number 3, the thumb crosses and rests on the second knuckle of the little finger, actually lining up with the palm knuckle beneath it, as if the little finger were not in the way. Note that the vector lines from the outside of the little finger and from the outside of the thumb converge at 0 point and are perfectly equal in distance from each other. Awareness of this relationship will help you in drawing various hand positions in which the thumb is folded over closed fingers. The sketch of open palm at right shows how the little finger can be brought downward across the palm and will almost touch the 0 point. This is the only finger which will align with this point. Finding little finger and thumb relationships. If the fingers are fully outstretched as shown in the center drawing, there will be a 180-degree angle between the tip of the little finger and the tip of the thumb. If the thumb and little finger are brought together over the midline of the palm, with the other 3 fingers outstretched, as shown in the drawing at upper left, the fingertips will meet as if both fingers were the same length. This relationship can also be seen in the sketch at lower right, with the hand shown from a foreshortened rear view. 2 positions of the thumb and little finger relationship are shown, inner and outer. If the little finger and thumb were to go from flat, horizontal positions up to an erect, closed position, the fingers at any stage would be given equal length. Fingers in stress positions in the upper, deep palmar view, with fingers stressed in full extension. Note how the little finger and thumb appear to be tips of symmetrical horns, lying at the end of a great wave-like arc. See smaller schematic at left, period. The lower sketch shows fingers more outstretched, with thumb and little finger moving toward each other but still maintaining the wave-like form. Special characteristics. All hands and arms have a special behavioral characteristic which they also share with the legs. They tend to curve inward. This may account for the consistent undercurve of the arms mentioned earlier in Chapter 1. As the arms move forward in action, the tension projects the hands forward from the lines of the arms, as shown in the drawing above. Note especially the directional arrows on the forearms and displayed index finger thrusts. Note in the drawing below that fingernails of receding fingers rotate from an almost straight-on view, shown by the index finger, to a curve on the little finger that is almost out of sight. The thumbnail, however, rotates according to the action of the hand or the action of the thumb. Relationship of hand measures to face and ARM. If the base of the palm is level with the chin base, as shown at left, the fingers will reach the brow, and the long middle finger will touch the hairline. If the thumb is placed in the inner arm elbow depression, as shown at right, the hand will span from that point to the base of the palm. A knowledge of these proportions will be extremely useful when dealing with the figure as a whole. Hand and face measurements. And a final note on measured relationships: if the hand is placed in side position and laid on the brow, it will fit almost exactly between the hairline and the eyebrows. In some cases, a large hand will also cover the nose root. The palm can also be placed in side position in contact with the nose base, and the side of the palm will reach the base of the chin. These measuring cues can be especially useful when drawing multiple figure compositions. 3. Anatomy and structure. When the artist studies human anatomy, he is not usually pursuing the same goals as the medical doctor or the scientist. He is searching for visual form which can be translated aesthetically and augmented imaginatively. However, knowledge of anatomy is essential for an understanding of various attitudes, postures, and movements. It allows the artist to truly understand the surface contours of the body because he knows the forms and structures underneath. It also teaches him why the surface forms appear as they do. Hopefully you will not be so caught in the study of the parts that you forget the rhythmic and unified whole. As you go through this chapter, you'll see the efficiency, order, and symmetry of the forms of the hand and the integrated way in which all work together to give the hand its wide variety of movement and response. The dorsal side of the hand, including the wrist, has a particularly bony surface, with many protrusions lying just under the skin. The hand begins above the wrist at the point where the radius, A, and ulna, B, form the pivotal radio-ulnar joint. Note that only the radius articulates with the 3 top wrist bones, carpal bones, to form the radiocarpal joint, X. Below the radiocarpal joint, the 8 compact wrist bones as on it make up the carpus, formed in a close-set ellipse, as seen in the schematic at right. Individually, they are known as carpals, and each has a separate name. The central lunate bone, C, tends to elevate the upper tier composed of the scaphoid bone, D, a boat-shaped form on the inside, the moon-shaped lunate bone, the wedge-shaped triquetrum bone on the outside, E, and the P-shaped pisiform bone, F. 4 larger carpals make up the lower tier. Articulating directly with the thumb is the saddle-shaped trapezium bone, G. Contacting the index finger is the boot-shaped trapezoid bone, H. Next, the keystone-shaped capitate bone, 1. Outside, the hooked hamate bone, J. Attached to the carpals are the metacarpals, collectively called the metacarpus. These bones of the palm have no individual names but are simply identified by number. The thumb is the first metacarpal, the index finger, the second metacarpal, and so on. They have characteristics of long bones, with the shaft end 2 ends, the upper end articulating with the carpals and the lower end attaching to the phalanges or finger bones. The carpals and metacarpals form the palm and are greatly limited in movement, since they are bound closely at their bases by the metacarpal ligaments K, and at their heads by the intermetacarpal ligaments L. The exception to this is the first metacarpal of the thumb. It is attached to the trapezium by a capsular ligament only, which allows it much wider activity than the other 4. Attached to the metacarpal bones are the phalanges, or fingers, of the hand. Each finger is called a phalanx, and each phalanx has 3 units, the proximal phalanx, M, the medial phalanx, N, and the terminal phalanx, O. The thumb again is the exception, having no medial phalanx. The terminal phalanx has a hammy, shell-like substance emerging from it called the unguis, P, or fingernail. 2 tiny bones scarcely worth mentioning, almost blended with the ligaments in surface tissue, are the sesamoid bones, Q, lying on the lower inside surface of the first metacarpal of the thumb. Skeleton in action. These 2 drawings show the bones of the wrist and hand in action. Note the limited movement of the carpals and metacarpals as compared to the wide range possible in the phalanges. The carpals in the lower sketch seem capable of only a slight rocking motion. As you sketch the information here, remember it is not the bones of the hand that are the object of your drawing. They are only underpinnings for the drawing in an active, dynamic phase, with fingers flexed or extended, knuckles developed, and the whole charged with vital energy. Movement possible beginning at the radiocarpal joint. A. The hand can move back and forth, from front to back, from side to side, and at intermediate or oblique angles. either side to side or front to back. This last possibility allows the hand to swivel or rotate. Note that the ulna is not involved in this movement, since only the radius is in contact with the carpals. Because the carpal bones are joined very closely, only a gliding motion can occur. However, as noted in the previous drawing, a slight rocking forward and backward is possible because of the curve of the two tiers. The large hand shown here is drawn with light and dark areas. The wrist bones and the finger bones from the second joint down are accented, as are the base joints of the four metacarpal, palm, bones. All other areas are kept light. The darker areas show the forms and joints which perform a limited movement. The lighter areas delineate forms which have freer movement. The four long metacarpal bones attached to both wrist bones and intermetacarpals are so constrained by the intermetacarpal ligaments B, that movement between them is negligible. The exception is the high thumb joint at the trapezium wrist bone, C, which is capable of much more freedom since no ligament controls it. The interphalangeal joints, D, E, on the middle and terminal forms of the fingers, darkened with transverse arrows on the full hand drawing, are capable of only forward and backward movement. Note in the action sketch of the thumb at upper left that the characteristic movement of the distal phalanx of the thumb is toward and away from the palm. This movement is the same for all phalanges of the other four fingers, as shown in the action drawing below. From the middle to the end joints, they can perform only a hinge movement. Summary of forms. These drawings summarize the forms discussed up to this point and the activities of which they are capable. These are the radiocarpal joint, A, the metacarpophalangeal joints from palm to finger, B, the wrist-thumb connection, the carpometacarpal joint, C, and the introphalangeal digit-to-digit joints, D. Each is capable of performing to a greater or lesser degree circular gyration, compression and extension backward and forward, and swinging or rocking from side to side. Study the drawings and use your own hand to discover the possibilities. Note the arched arrangement of the carpal shown in the rear views. This concavity is formed by a transverse ligament E, attached to the pisiform, F, and the hook of the hamate, G, at the outside in the crest of the trapezium, H, and the scaphoid, 1, on the inside. Externally this ligament is not visible, but its function is to maintain the dome shape of the palm. You'll see this if you place your palm on a flat surface. You cannot flatten the palm center even if you press down. 1. Tendon of extensor carpi ulnae res 10. Interphalangeal webbing 2 tendons of extensor digitorum communis 11 fingers. 3. Head of ulna first, pollex, thumb. 4. Annular ligament second, index 5. Origin of extensor carpi ulnae res 3rd, medius, middle. 6. Abductor digiti minimi 24th, digitus annularis, ring. 7. Tendon of extensor digiti minimi 5th, digitus minimus little. 8. Tendons of extensor digitorum communis 12 finger pads, palmar servus 9 tendinous interjunctures 13 abductor pollicis longus 14, extensor pollicis brevis 15, styloid process of radius 16. Tendon of extensor pollicis longus 17, origin of extensor carpi radialis longus 18, base of metacarpal to 19 dorsal interosseous muscles 20, adductor pollicis 21 tendon of extensor indicis 22. Finger pads, thumb, index, palmar surface, WSNS Saintis's FF Freezum WWWB, ISI Bay. Abductor pollicis longus 46, flexor carpi radialis, trapezium bone of wrist tendon of extensor pollicis longus extensor pollicis brevis brachioradialis annular ligament tendon of extensor pollicis brevis. Base of metacarpal I abductor pollicis brevis, thenar eminens, interosseous muscles, I, 2, adductor pollicis, lumbrical I, finger pads, palmar surface. Extensor digitorum communis, extensor pollicis longus, hamate bone of wrist tendons of extensor digitorum communis, tendon of extensor carpi radialis brevis. Tendon of extensor carpi radialis longus, trapezoid bone of wrist, tendon of extensor indicis fingers, first, pollex, thumb, second, index third, medius, middle, fourth, digitus annularis, ring. Sosa adhio copyright Gilu copyright, right hand, palmar aspect, tendon of flexor carpi radialis flexor digitorum sublimis. Tendon of palmaris longus, eminence of radial bone opponens pollicis, abductor pollicis brevis. Flexor pollicis brevis, adductor pollicis transversus. Dorsal interosseous I-10. Tendon of flexor pollicis longus 11. Finger pads 12. Sheath for flexor tendons 13. Fingers: I-first, pollex, thumb, second, index third, medius, middle, fourth, digitus annularis, ring, fifth, digitus minimus little. Tendon of palmaris longus, flexor digitorum sublimis, flexor carpi ulnaris, annular ligament, pisiform bone of wrist, hook of hamate bone of wrist. Abductor digiti minimi quinti, flexor digiti minimi, tendons of flexor digitorum sublimis lumbricals ill, IV, palmar interossei fibrous sheath finger pads Chiaorvni equals. Left hand, dorsal aspect, side view 1 2, 3, 4 5, 6, 7, 8 9, 10, I-12 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 21, 23, 24, 25, 26, 48 extensor digitorum communis, annular ligament, eminence of lunate bone of wrist, triquetrum bone of wrist. Hamate bone of wrist, origin of tendon of extensor carpi ulnaris, base of metacarpal V, dorsal interosseous, tendinous interjuncture, tendons of extensor digitorum communis. Finger pads, fingers: first, pollex, thumb, second, index third, medius, middle, fourth, digitus annularis, ring, fifth, digitus minimus little. Extensor carpi ulnaris, flexor carpi ulnaris, head of ulna, flexor digitorum sublimis, palmaris longus, pisiform bone of wrist, thenar eminence opponens pollicis, abductor pollicis, flexor pollicis brevis, hypothenar eminence, abductor digiti minimi quinti. Finger pads of thumb, interphalangeal webbing. Veins of the hand, blood vessels through the body, tend to lie in depressions, generally in hollows between elevated forms. They are thus in a position of safety, out of the way of impact or injury. This is particularly true of the hand, where no veins protrude on the palmar side, and where they tend to lie between forms on the dorsal side. The drawing at left shows the venous network coursing around the elevated knuckles, circling and crossing the finger shanks, and rising along the side planes of the fingers. Higher up, the venous system branches off into two main trunks, A2, and two main tributaries, B2, ascending vertically from a transverse channel, the dorsal venous arch, C, above the palm knuckles. The drawing at right, with arm extended downward, shows the location of veins along the main muscles of the inner arm. Note their deep entrenchment, especially at the elbow. Here on the opposite page, the principle of non-vulnerability becomes readily apparent. The network of blood vessels and tributaries on the dorsal side of the hand is complex and diversified, since this side of the hand is not subjected to the unremitting activity of the palmar side. 1. Basilic vein, veering outward. 2. Cephalic vein, veering inward. A5. Dorsal venous arch. 6. Dorsal digital veins, pi copyright ISEX A2 KSSDs KXSS Augataxa, S. Conversely, the palmar venous system is markedly simpler than that of the dorsal side, especially in the fingers. This system allows for the flexing, closing, and clenching actions of the inner hand, with the extremes of pressure encountered through a working day. Encephalic vein, median vein tributaries to basilic vein, transverse palmar arch, longitudinal digital veins. 4. Anatomical landmarks and surface stress. The artist can truly understand surface forms only by knowing their underlying structures and their form and behavior under tension, stress, and activity. We are still dealing with anatomy in this chapter, but from the viewpoint of dominant surface stress. Elbow and ARM structures. The skeleton